Look who's here, everyone. Oh, Marjorie has her Okoboji t-shirt on. I love to see that. All right. Well, this is kind of like a potluck, only it's without any potato salad of any kind, let alone Hy-Vee potato salad. And it's not actually a dinner. And we don't have to clean up afterwards. But other than that, it's kind of like a potluck, Roxanne.
I know. I can see friends, lots of friends,
Ha,
and new friends.
new friends. Okay. All right, we are recording. We have Roxanne on the call. There was a moment or two about 5 minutes ago when we weren't sure that was going to happen. But
Oh, my technological skills are lacking. All my teenage children and grandchildren could operate any kind of technology like it's like they're born with it. And when I was born, there was barely radio.
okay, hold up your fingers again.
Oh, fingers. Yeah. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone, from a
Oh,
real Irish person.
we are green for St. Patrick's Day. Oh my God. So, Roxanne Conlin is today's guest. She's one of Iowa's most accomplished and respected trial lawyers whose career has been devoted to protecting the rights of workers. And we were having lunch the other day, and as a parting shot, she said, "You would not believe employment law in this state today." And I thought, Roxanne, that would be a pretty good podcast topic, don't you think? So here we are. I'm in among friends, but this will be heard by other people. So just keep that in mind,
Law
counselor.
in the state for 60 years. That we have gone back at least 30 of those 60 years in this session of the legislature. And in terms of what the Iowa Supreme Court, which is now 7-0 against me whenever I stand up before them, I know they can't hear what I'm saying. So let me tell you some of the changes that have unfortunately happened. Let me start first by saying something that I said to Julie not very long ago, and that is that most people believe that if they work for somebody for 20 years and they suddenly get fired, they can sue. They cannot. The only time that employment decisions are illegal and actionable is if they are made on some forbidden basis. Now, if you've worked for the company for 20 years, it's possible you have an age discrimination case, but all cases are now more difficult to try than they used to be. But the protected classes in Iowa have also shrunk, as all of you may be aware. Transgender people could sue if they were discriminated against in employment, public accommodations, housing, and education. They can't now. That right, that precious civil right, was for the first time ever, Iowa civil rights were reduced in Iowa. So we have some cases that precede the the change, and I'm going to tell you about one of them. Some of you may remember this. This happened in 2020, right before everything shut down for COVID. A group of students, Iowa Safe Schools, some of you are probably familiar with Iowa Safe Schools, um, always has a legislative action day where they come and their allies come and they lobby the legislature about things having to do with the LGBT community. So they're there, and it took us a while to figure out what happened exactly, but we found out that a legislator, we do not know who, they wouldn't tell us or they didn't know. A legislator said, "There's a girl in the men's bathroom." There was no assertion at all that this girl in the women's restroom was doing anything untoward, but nonetheless, as a result of that singular complaint, all 30 or so members of the Iowa Safe Schools organization were banned, were removed forcibly, in some cases, put on the steps of the Iowa Capitol in the cold without their belongings. First, and hopefully last time ever, that an entire group of people was excluded, citizens were excluded from the Iowa Capitol. It took a long time, but that case was settled recently. Each student got money, good money. But it doesn't really, the purpose of civil law is compensation and hopefully deterrence. So when the George Floyd protests started, we kept an eye on that, obviously, to see whether or not another event would occur where all Black people would be excluded from the Capitol. Unfortunately, that did not occur. So we think the deterrence may have worked at least a little bit in this case.
Roxanne, as I think back about your career, and I'm sure I'll miss some prominent cases, but how many of those cases that where you've represented and won the case would he be not able to be put forth under this new employment law overhaul?
Okay, well, we've done a number of transgender rights cases, so of course those are out. But there's another change in the law that was imposed by the Iowa Supreme Court that would influence a lot of our sexual harassment cases. I tried the Channon case in 1998, and many of you might remember that because it was an $80 million verdict for one single woman who was horribly mistreated. And that case involved, she worked there for 23 years, and she was a brilliant woman, and she knew everything about what the company did. And just in case you do not know this, UPS keeps track of everything. I mean, everything. So she knew where to look. And also, I was able to introduce into evidence the way other women were treated by UPS. Probably had 12 other women in management positions who each were badly treated in some way by a company whose culture was sexist. That could not happen today. Now, in order to introduce evidence of the treatment of other women, the treatment of other women has to be known to the plaintiff. The treatment of other women has to be in the same department and by the same people. That substantially, we all know, I'm assuming you all know this, any discrimination on the basis of race is class discrimination. Any discrimination on the basis of sex is class discrimination. So whatever happens to the class, in my opinion, should be admissible to prove what happened to my client. And it used to be. It used to be in the Sawyer case against IBP. We introduced lots of evidence of other acts, evidence against women and African Americans at IBP. In the Lynch case, the very first case tried, the very first sexual harassment case tried in Iowa, we had every single female member of the Des Moines Police Department come and testify about what bad things happened to her. They were called by the city of Des Moines, which was not aware that I knew what had happened to every single one of their witnesses, and they'd all been the victim of discrimination. That, again, that cannot happen in Iowa anymore. And it's going to substantially limit, it's not going to limit sexual harassment or sex discrimination. It's going to increase that, but it's going to limit the cases that we can take.
Question, and you might not like this question, but
that's always stopped you before.
So, okay, so you have been a champion for people who are underrepresented, who don't have a voice, etc. there's one thing the far right would love for us to be talking about in this upcoming election, and that's transgender rights. How, when you ran for office, you ran for governor, you ran for U.S. Senate, not that this was an issue in the gubernatorial race, but how do you integrate those two beliefs?
Well, when I ran for, it was not an issue in either of the times that I won. Now it is the issue, even though such a tiny percent of people are transgender, such a tiny percent.
Right,
And of course, it's women's sports and restrooms, for crying out loud.
right.
Um, it is a puzzle to me why this has become such a volatile issue in politics. And the reason is because Republicans would want it to be, because they perceive that their evangelical and otherwise very conservative uh, group of people think that it is against God's law. God makes transgender people, so it can't be against God's law. I don't know how I would handle that, Julie. I've been asking my friends who are running for office how they're going to handle it. I think it's powerful, but I don't think that it trumps the economy. I don't think it trumps gas prices. I don't think it trumps the war. And I'm using the word Trump advisedly.
This is going to be great. Okay, I could hog you for the whole hour, but I've got lots of people on the call who I'm sure would love to say hello. And I'm looking at the list. I think a couple of them you've represented, although they might not need to talk about it. Chuck, I don't think Roxanne's represented you, but
No,
but I'm sure you would have asked her if the case had been uh, something you wanted her to represent you for.
Well, I think we're all going to be, all of us who are media ragamuffins are going to be telling Roxanne Conlin stories for as long as we're around because your career has been so rich with them, um, and so many historic cases and so much historic leadership. And then you throw in tidbits like you were the best jitterbugger in Iowa, and
I
so
am, and
that
I
makes
still
you damn good copy, as we say. Um,
am.
I, when I
I
listen to
have
you,
won contests.
yes, I know you have.
Okay, just
Very,
FYI, we're not kidding about this.
No,
yeah,
Chuck,
very.
may I interject that I thought she would have a ball when she ran for office doing dancing with Roxanne events around the state.
And you were right.
Oh, well,
We, you should have done that.
nobody listened to me. What can I say?
Yeah, well, except I don't know very many men who can dance, and I say that with love.
Well, one of them who could not dance, and you might have forced him to try, was Terry Branstad. That would have been hilarious watching
That
him
would
try
have
to do
been,
that.
oh goodness, we should have decided the issues. We should have decided the gubernatorial race on that basis.
Yeah. Well, when I listen to you talk, and of course, I think you're right about this, about the transgender discrimination that's now been reauthorized, and so many other reversals of rights that we treasured in Iowa. Um, and it just seems to me that one thing that it just seems to me to be such a Kansification, as someone has coined that word, such a Kansification of Iowa. Kansas has been through this. Our neighbor state has been through this and wound up deciding they'd gone way too far on so many fronts, and they started making some changes. I think in Iowa that the things that we see happening now, and uh, I think they're anti-business. And I mean, at a time when we're trying to do national and global business here in Iowa, this kind of rights shutdown just is an appalling image for our state out there. Um, and I think maybe that's when you're talking to people that you know who are running for office now. I mean, I think that's probably an effective um, tool they can use to talk about that in terms of that. Now, I'm saying that I've been a little disappointed in the response from business in Iowa. We've had strong statements over past years at times when we were protecting rights. The business stood up and said we were heading in the right direction. I'm not hearing that now. And what's your take on that?
My take is that DEI has become illegal. And I think businesses are terrified to talk about any issue having to do with discrimination. I can't blame them too much, though I will sue them for it. But I do think that this atmosphere, I've never seen it like this. I go back so many years, and there was a time when race discrimination was the norm. And I think we're going back there. I think I see, I just settled a case involving a company who permitted a coworker of my African American client to call him the N-word and to engage in every single stereotype of Black people like watermelon and fried chicken, and every stereotype that we thought was gone from the culture. It has reared its very ugly head again. So, but
Well,
if I know about it, I'm going to try to do something about it. Under the circumstances with this Supreme Court, I can't be very encouraging about what we can do. And the Supreme Court, we may get a new governor, but we aren't going to get a new Supreme Court.
I hear you. Julie, I should note that across the top of my website, offenberger.com, it says in blue ink that I added about a year and a half ago, committed to diversity, inclusiveness, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I may yet have to hire Roxanne to defend me as we go ahead and push that.
I was a business consultant for 25 years. Most of you on this call who knew me before that and know me now would find that hard to believe. But that's what I did for 25 years.
I remember that.
I know. And so I heard all these top flight speakers on business and creating new markets and all that sort of thing. Without exception, people were making sure folks, their clients, business clients, knew how important diversity, equity, and inclusion is to running a business. You hear different perspectives. You are then have access to different markets. It's like, hello, duh. So why aren't these business people standing up? I guess they're doing so on the side. They're just not calling it diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what chicken shits?
Yeah. Well, except, when the president is going to call you out in his Truth Social post in the middle of the night, it might be a significant deterrent, particularly to nationwide companies.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to recruit people to come to Iowa from executive.
Of course it is. It is. And, I hear that. Do all of you hear that? I hear that from my friends who are in business. Because of what has happened here, we used to be a purple state, and now we are bright red, and it is really affecting people's willingness to make their homes here. I had a granddaughter who just had a baby, and I was scared for her. I was afraid she might have an ectopic pregnancy, and we'd have to put her on a jet to someplace. But that did not happen. The baby is born and is too cute.
I'm going to invite Barry Pyatt, who's another member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative, to chime in here. He's based in Washington, D.C. Barry?
Yeah, I just, first of all, I want to thank you, Roxanne, for your work over your lifetime. If there's any justice in this world, there will one day be an exhibit based on your work at the Iowa Historical.
Except we don't have an Iowa Historical. Don't you know, Barry? We don't have it. They're going to eliminate the Iowa Historical Society.
Well, they're going to keep the museum, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Is that your understanding, Julie? I think they're going to
I'm not sure it's a museum, but we should look at. Chuck, do you know? Offenberger?
I think they are uh, moving to shut down the record center
in Iowa
that has
City.
existed in Iowa City.
Yeah.
I think they're going to maintain the one in Des Moines, the museum in Des Moines, and the State Historical Society. I think it's going to be maintained. But is
Okay.
that a real state agency now? It's been combined with another department, I think.
We'll have to take that topic off. Actually, bring somebody.
Yeah, but Barry probably had a question
Yes.
Yeah.
or a comment.
Yeah,
I
I
think
do.
we ought to build a bronze statue of Roxanne.
That's right. Well, even if there's no building to put it in, I just want to make the point that your work is historic
Thank you very much.
for our state, and I want to thank you for it.
Thank you.
My question is, the Iowa that I grew up in no longer exists. Bob Ray couldn't get elected dog catcher in Iowa today. And I know that leadership from people like the president and the governor and our senators and our congressmen and women, all are, that leadership is important in helping develop the culture in a state. But how did we go from, how did this happen? How did Iowa politically is as broken as it has ever been?
I agree.
And how did that happen?
We had the whole government has been in charge of people who want to take us back to some unknown time when everything was fine and dandy. There were not Black people in Iowa. There were not gay people in Iowa. There were not people that we didn't like in Iowa. It's amazing to me what has happened to this state that I dearly love, that I have made my home in, and that I will never leave, though it has kind of left me. What is more amazing than anything else is the enmity that people feel toward one another. The Iowa nice, Iowa neighborliness is just gone if you belong to the wrong party or the wrong religion. So I'm heartbroken about it. And frankly, I place a lot of my hope on Roxanne as a person who can start our trek back to the Iowa that I think, looking around, that most of us knew and loved. It can't be gone. We can't leave it behind for something so much worse. But trying to put it back together is going to be very difficult. How are we going to get back the almost $400 million that we're spending now on private schools? I don't know the answer to that, but I think Roxanne does.
So just let me insert the museum in Des Moines. The Historical Museum in Des Moines is open, and the State Historical Society's Research Center in Iowa City is being closed. So that I just verified that. So who has a question?
Well, that makes me happy.
Well, there's still plenty to be sad about, but with
Yeah.
that, with the project in Iowa City going by the wayside.
Yeah.
But who has a question or a comment? I see Artis, you're on the call. I bet you have. Yeah, why don't you chime in here?
Artis, we miss you in Polk
Yes.
County District Court.
Here we have. One thing about our age group is we have a hell of a time turning on our microphone on a Zoom call. We could do a whole Saturday Night Live skit. Hello, hello, your mic's not on. Hello, hello. Artis, you can't turn on your mic? Oh, for God's sake. All right. I know Ralph Rosenberg can. Come on. We'll come back to you when you get it on. Hello.
All right. Hey, I think, Roxanne, I door knocked for you in 1980 when you were running for governor, when you were a high school student, first high school student to run for governor. I don't know if people knew that.
I was very young, but so was Branstad.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew that. But I want to extend some of the conversation to remind people that as recently as 2008, businesses were supportive of all the civil rights laws, not on individual cases. I mean, when I was director of the Civil Rights Commission, they fought us and went to court and so forth. But in terms of the CEOs, And I was trying to list some of the CEOs that actively lobbied, that came up to the Capitol, which is kind of unusual, came up and met with majority and minority leadership. And I remember Principal, I think Wells Fargo,
Wellmark,
Wellmark,
Woodruff
yes,
Blue
right,
Shield,
Wellmark. And they were
John,
putting
John
their
Deere.
name and the reputation out for say, we want this. And I remember I was present because there was a small group of us lobbying on the laws. Some of you know the other people there, like Alicia Claypool. And the businesses say, we need these laws. We need, so people say, what happened? The business CEOs were saying it, not my do good or Ralph stuff. We need these laws to attract and maintain young people. And I thought that has been gone. And when was it? 3 years ago, the Republicans started to remove civil rights protections. They really gutted the way civil rights law works. We never had a real strong commission, but they really worsened it. And I noticed the businesses weren't doing stuff as much. The CEOs weren't writing letters, the editor, they weren't. And I was contacting the lobbyists. They were just not becoming present about it. And I'm interested in, maybe that's a little bit of comment, but in the question is, Roxanne talked about DEI as being the reason. So I just want to pursue it. Roxanne, are you thinking that they're actually worried about litigation if they speak out in terms of diversity laws?
Ralph, the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is suing companies that maintain DEI programs. They're bringing action against companies who do that. And they're bringing action on behalf of white people who believe that they've been discriminated against by Black people or other people. It's turned the whole civil rights movement that you and I knew and worked at for our whole lifetimes upside down, totally upside down. It's really distressing and disgusting to stand by and watch this. And believe me, if there was something I could do about it, I would. But the Civil Rights Commission, it's now called the Iowa Office of Civil Rights because there is no more Iowa Civil Rights Commission, and there's an internal administrative process that you must complete before you can go to court. And we have had a good relationship with the Civil Rights Commission despite all evidence to the contrary until quite recently. And now we have cases pending at the first stage before the finding stage for 2 years. Tough cases, needless to say, tough cases, but 2 years in the Civil Rights Commission waiting for the commission to make a decision. And they say it doesn't really matter because we can always take it out of the Civil Rights Commission and file it in district court. But that finding, which was in our cases always positive, some of you may not, probably most of you do not have knowledge about how this all works, but you file your complaint, you must file a complaint of discrimination with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, and then they make an initial finding based on the paperwork alone. They don't do any investigation. They just make an initial finding of whether or not there's reasonable cause to move forward with an investigation. It is at that point that many cases are resolved. It is at that point because the finding, it used to be the finding was always positive for us because we know what we're doing. And so we would wait for the finding, and then we would send a demand letter to the employer and suggest that we resolve the case before we spend a lot of money on experts and depositions and that kind of stuff. And that worked a lot. I mean, that worked very well. Now we can't get a finding. So we're going to have to start going to not federal, God knows, not federal court. Artist, I see that you can work your microphone.
On in, Artist.
Finally, and I agree with Ralph as another Civil Rights Commission alumni here. It used to be different because employers used to want to stay out of trouble. They used to want to know how to do this right. And we would go in and we would do training on what is sexual harassment into companies. And then they would support the programs if they understood it, and we explained and cooperated with them. And it's just so different now. Roxanne, I want to thank you, of course, for all that you have done, and to tell you my heart is broken about the taking away of transgender rights. It's hard to believe that this is happening. My hope is also in Rob's hand, because I'm hoping that he can appoint agency directors and commissioners and influence the legislature to be better people.
I hope you're right. And thank you for the compliment. And thank you, artists, for all of your good work, both in the commission and as a wonderful, fair, just
Thank you.
court judge. We don't have so many of them anymore.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of the reasons why we do this, Roxanne, is there's something about coming together in a community and realizing that we're not alone. I hear that whenever I go out in the state about what we do here at the potluck and with the Iowa Writers Collaborative. People don't feel so alone, and sometimes that's pretty pervasive, based on banning books, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Who ever thought we would be living in a time when books would be banned? I can't imagine how anybody could suggest banning books and yet letting their children have an iPad. I mean, hello? Do we not know what's on the internet? Excuse me? I don't get it. But we have hands raised from Bryce Oakley, then Liz Sizer, and Carl Schilling. I'd like to
I
call.
don't see Bryce I haven't seen Bryce for such a long time. I might not recognize him. Oh, there he is. Hi, Bryce. How are you?
Oh, fine, Roxanne. I think if I'd done a better job with Terry Branstad, you might have been governor in 1980, but that's another story. I just want to make one observation. We've been lamenting why certain people aren't lobbying and so forth. I think the problem is that we've nationalized our public policy making. We have nationalized our business community. We're regional offices in many respects. We've nationalized in fact, monopolized as well, our urban or our rural business community. So consequently, we are no longer, as a state in the current political setup, really a captain of our own ship. The captains are elsewhere. Citizens United, somebody noted that, had a good deal to do with that. So we are sort of a satellite, if you will, on public policy making. If you look at the policy proposals, both dealing with business, insurance, a lot of those kinds of entities, those policies are being made elsewhere in think tanks, and they're shipped out mostly to red states, for example, and we happen to be red, and we happen to have a legislature and a governor that have abided that nationalization of policymaking that moves model bills from legislature to legislature. So I would agree with you with regard to Roxanne. His focus would be different. He gets it. And there are others as well that are pleased to see are running. But the short of it is, we've nationalized, we're a nationalized state, and it's going to be a long haul to change that.
It's going to be a long way back. It seems to me as though things have changed rapidly. Yeah. And you're right, Heritage Foundation puts out what it wants, and everybody goes along with it. And there's a legislative group of the same sort that sends out potential bills to the Iowa legislature, and they pass them. And it's disheartening. But listen, we cannot give up. We cannot throw in the towel. We cannot stand down. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep telling the truth as we know it and doing the best we can every single day to make things better. And so I'm glad I'm on this podcast with all kinds of people who do exactly that.
Liz Sizer is one such person. Liz, you're next.
Hey, Liz.
Hi, Roxanne, and I also thank you for your leadership. Um, I was very lucky to have half of my career in human resource management for reputable companies, organizations, and then was on the PER board and the Employment Appeal Board for the last half of my career. And I'm grateful for that career when it was, because I couldn't have a career like that now in the current climate. And one of the things that struck me all the times that I did investigations of sexual harassment in our workplaces was how disruptive it was to the business of that particular organization or entity that had the problem. It wasn't just the targeted individual, usually, who was derailed by the bad behavior in the workplace. It was the whole damn unit. And so if you could get in there and correct that, you weren't just doing a favor to the targeted person, you were doing something that was very healthy for the business unit too.
When I speak to companies, I explain that one of the ways to avoid a lawsuit, if sexual harassment is happening in your company, you have to ferret it out and take immediate action to correct it. If you do that, I can't sue you. If you take immediate corrective remedial action when you learn about sexual harassment, I cannot tell you why it doesn't happen, but it almost never happens. And in many cases, the whole issue is compounded by the company not taking action, trying to cover it up, moving people around to different places, making statements that are provably false. It's a very disheartening. I have to tell you, I tried the first case ever tried under the Iowa Civil Rights Act. I didn't try it very well, and the Supreme Court told me I didn't try it very well, so I'm not guessing. But that I really felt when I started doing this work that 10 years and everybody would know the law, and I could move on to like environmental protection or something else. That has been, I was so, I mean, I thought people would know the law and then they would follow it. But that has proven to be not true. At first, also, we thought that the cases would be failure to hire cases. They're not. Almost all cases are firing cases. And now, of course, the evidence is difficult to come by.
Are you able to speak to the status of Iowa law in terms of work comp changes?
No.
Okay.
I send my work comp cases to, I send them to Shop Moss.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it. Roxanne, if you were representing any of the Epstein victims, what would be different about this case?
Well, you know, I do represent, some of you are fully aware of this, I represent the victims of crime in civil lawsuits against not usually the perpetrators, because the perpetrators are hopefully in jail, or otherwise, you know, a lawsuit requires three things: negligence or inappropriate conduct that caused harm, and that whoever you sue has enough resources to pay for the harm. So suing individual perpetrators is generally not advisable and not possible. Sometimes I do it anyway. If you want to find me, I have a URL called Some People Just Need to Be Sued.com. It brings you right to my website. But the fact is that apartment buildings, hotels, parking lots, shopping malls, other places like that take action that makes rape and other crimes possible. I sue them. But if I had the opportunity to, I did not, I have had some contact, Julie, And I sent those women to the people that I know who are doing these cases, who have the background and who can stand up to this onslaught. And I think that the women who are representing those women, and they're almost all women lawyers involved in this horrifying situation, are absolutely doing the right thing. The women who were victimized are now all adults, and many of them were not adults when this happened to them, and they were so innocent. Can you put yourself, those of you who are women, can you put yourself back when you were 15, and when you hadn't had sex, you didn't know about sex, and some big deal guy came to you and said, I think you should be a model, and we'll pay for your training and we'll pay for your transportation and da 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 da. It was easy to get those young women to comply with these outrageous requests. And we should never, ever blame them, because I can put myself back there. I can understand what went through their minds. I had some similar experiences, but but I was in college. So I knew where I was going. But I don't think I do anything different, Julie. You cannot imagine how many lawsuits are pending. Lawsuits to get the documents, lawsuits to punish other perpetrators, lawsuits against the government. I mean, there's no ability to cover all of the lawsuits involving the Epstein victims. There's just, I won't say a million, but I will say thousands.
So I will confess to being obviously naive, but you were a U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
I look back on all of the women who came to the officials, to the prosecutors, to the people who are supposed to keep people safe, and they were ignored. Their testimony was buried. I just can't believe this pattern has happened all throughout the decades.
I can believe that it has happened. More is the pity, but now it appears as though justice will ultimately be done, because there are 1,000 lawsuits pending with good lawyers who will pursue those lawsuits to the bitter end. And the evidence that we see, and we don't see nearly all of it, of course, and what they endure. They're talking to their own lawyers. Most of their lawyers are advising them not to speak publicly, as I would advise my own clients under these circumstances, because it makes them a target of crazy people. But some of these women are not afraid to speak out. 40 or 50 of them are speaking out regularly, attending meetings, doing what they can to try to make some justice happen. The fact that one of the perpetrators is the President of the United States certainly complicates that effort.
Let's switch to sex trafficking as an industry and your perspective on how pervasive it is, and why aren't we seeing more prosecutions for the perpetrators of that?
Iowa is a center of sex trafficking. Do you all know that? We are the confluence of two interstates, 35 and 80, and that makes us a hub of sex trafficking. Why are there not more prosecutions? Because the women who are trafficked, do you all see the behind the door on women's restrooms now, there is often, do you need help kind of a sound. We're all responsible for that. But the women who are trafficked sometimes don't even realize that is what is happening to them. I've done some sex trafficking cases of women who reach their 20s and suddenly say, what in the world has happened to my life? What am I doing? We have done as much as we can to educate law enforcement officers that if they have a quote prostitute who's 14 or 15 or 16 or 17, that person is not a prostitute. That person is being trafficked. Still a lot of resistance to that, but the United States Attorney's Office here in Des Moines has prosecuted a number of sex trafficking cases. And I prosecuted recently a labor trafficking case against the Western Iowa Community Technical College. They lured Brazilian students to the college with a promise of education in robotics and intellectual property. And instead, they were lured to Sioux City, where I used to live, and put to work on the lines of a pet food company and another, both of them were pet food companies, working 12-hour shifts. It was outrageous. And when the federal government discovered what had happened, they closed down the J-1 visa program and left these children on the street. These young people who had left their homes and their families and their pets and sold their cars to come to the United States and follow the American dream were on the street. So anyway, we settled those cases too.
When you look at the purging of career prosecutors and people in the FBI and throughout the judicial system, what is the impact of that on a place like Iowa?
We have, to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't reached really Iowa. Iowa's had sort of apolitical U.S. attorneys, generally speaking. Iowa has not seen the sort of, we've not been involved in the investigations that are resulting in the purging. But I maintain contact with some of my friends from the FBI. They're all retired now, but there's some kind of a bulletin board or some kind of a thing where the FBI agents talk to one another. And you can imagine that these people who have devoted their life to fair, full law enforcement careers, you can imagine how they feel about what has happened to the FBI under Trump. It was always supposed to be apolitical. It wasn't supposed to do what the president said. It was supposed to do what the law called for. And it has been it has been revolutionized in the worst possible way, and it's broken the hearts of a lot of my FBI friends.
Carl Schilling, are you available? Is your mic on? Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, I think so.
Good.
Okay, Carl. Carl did not have trouble turning on his mic. Yay, Carl.
Gold stars.
I have a history of that, though.
We're not making fun of you, artists. I promise. It's just
we're sharing the pain of not being technologically gifted.
Yeah, but
and
I guess the
admiration for you on your microphone.
Yeah, the point I was making in the chat.
Oh, I don't see
is that about an hour ago, I was involved in a committee. One of the organizations I belong to trains and certifies victim support workers, and we're setting up a training. And in the past, we have had a segment on how to deal with cultural differences. And so there was a serious discussion as to whether we can still do that. And I think we can, and I think we will go ahead with it. But the recent legislation has just cast a pall on all kinds of things. And I'm also with the Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking. Last year, we had an omnibus bill that would do a lot of good things in helping that issue. And it was Brian Losey, a Republican, who sponsored it. But Brian also voted with the Democrats against the transgender removal from the commission laws. And he was told, well, if you're going to vote with the Democrats, see if you can get them to pass your trafficking bill.
Mm.
And it died. And we're trying again this year, but there's just so much going on in this that it touches everything.
It does.
It
It it it impacts jurors. You know, I go to court with good cases. I'm trying to convince a jury that something bad happened to my client, and I have to choose the people who will make that decision. It has become very close to impossible to do that. We do written questionnaires now, which which some people resent, and so they don't really answer them. It really has poisoned the atmosphere to the point where breathing is difficult.
Oh, thank you, Carl, so much. Marjorie Nelson is on the call. Are you there, Marjorie?
I'm here, yes.
Okay.
Roxanne, this was a long time ago, but number one, I want to thank you. I was discriminated against by what I think is the largest company in Iowa right now. And you didn't take my case because I lived up in Northwest Iowa and I wanted a lawyer closer to where I lived, but you directed me to someone who was very pragmatic in Sioux City. And
I know who it was.
you know who he was,
Yes, I do.
Robert Sikma.
Yeah.
And I settled out of court because I chose to not have the publicity at the time, and I knew that it would be splashed in the papers and so on. And I needed to find another job, and I wanted it in education. And I was fearful that superintendents would think I was trouble if my case was publicized. Anyway, I want to thank you for that. I am quite well retired because of that lawsuit. And
Good for you, Marjorie.
yes, and because I invested well and so forth. But like I said, that was a long time ago. But when I go in those places of business, and I think with this group I can say it was Hy-Vee, and when I go in and see women in management positions, I know that I've done something good in my life because the EEOC, I didn't just settle for money. I made it so the EEOC would go in for 6 years unannounced and check on advancing women in the stores. I personally was involved with the office. But anyway, then I also wanted to tell you, I wanted to thank you for that, by the way, but I wanted to tell you that I had a dinner at my house to raise money for you when you were running for.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, and it was a wonderful, it was so disappointing when, the way the outcome, but it was wonderful to be able to raise money for you. So I wanted to tell you those two things.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. Thank you for having the dinner. And it was disappointing, but I afterwards I give a lot of speeches about the loss, why the loss happened, and I always said, if someone had asked me at the beginning, would you go through this again? All the turmoil, all the trial, all the trouble, all the pain, and it was a lot of pain.
Oh, yes.
A lot of pain. Would you go through it? And I said, yes, I would, because I inspired a whole generation of women leaders. Many of them ran for the legislature. All of you know some of them, and that was worth it. And then I got letters from students, children, young people who I had one letter that I'll never forget. Young woman, I think in the 4th or the 5th grade, she wrote me a letter after I lost, and she said, I'm sorry you lost, but you should know that our teachers told us we could do anything, and you showed us we could.
Well, thank you, Marjorie. Appreciate that. And Roxanne, I think that's a good note to end on. I so appreciate you for all that you do. And Judy Conlin was in the chat. She said the family has some kind of statue of you. I don't know.
She's probably going to carve it. I haven't had a chance to read the chats. Will they be on?
Well, I'll save it for you. Tom
Okay,
Colvin was on the call, of course, with the Animal Rescue League. I'll bet you anything. I don't know.
Hello, Roxanne.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for this. You know, I'm always reminded when I hear you talk about things other than animals, since you're so involved with animals, that it always just takes me back when people, particularly at the Capitol lately, say, you know, we just have to do this for people. We can't do it for animals. But you're here to show that actually a person's heart can extend to people and animals, can it? It doesn't have to be one or the other. Right?
Absolutely. And most of you may be aware that I have been since 1998 a foster parent for the Animal Rescue League. I take mother cats and their babies, sometimes the babies without a mother cat, but I don't do that too much anymore because every 2 hours around the clock is sometimes the schedule that one has to keep. But even today, I have a mom and 6 little kittens that are so cute. And then I have 2 moms, 2 co-parents, 2 sisters, we think, who came with their 5 babies. So I have 11 kittens and 3 moms, and I love them all with all my heart. And I love all of you with all my heart as well.
Well, I agree with Tim Wagner's statement here he had on here that says, thank you for being you, Roxanne.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Tom.
And Tom, I'll bet you we could arrange to have a statue of Roxanne somewhere on the Animal Rescue League property.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm not dead yet.
No, you're not.
And you know, I'm not retired yet. And Julie and I've talked about this. Maybe talk to Tom too. I do not intend to retire unless health requires of me that I do that. As long as I'm a responsible person, so I go and have my mind checked every couple of years because I don't want to be practicing law without the ability to do so. And so far, so good.
Indeed, so far so good. Thank you, everyone, for joining this call with the wonderful Roxanne Conlin.
Thank you, Julie. Hope to do it again.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Save the cat.
In a Dublin pub at midnight where the lanterns glow in gold, I push the door and feel the floor grow restless, loud and old. I take a seat and order stout, the room begins to gleam, for right beneath my bar stool something flickers like a dream. A tiny man with fiery hair looks up at me and grins. You're chasing luck, then look within, that's where it all begins. He climbs atop a whiskey cask and shouts with wild delight, and suddenly the whole pub sways as if the world turned light. Oh, dance with the leprechauns till your worries fade away, till the shadows lose their meaning and the doubts forget to stay. Raise your glass to ancient stories and the courage in your bones. Those who dance with leprechauns will never